The year was 2010. Katy Perry, Lady Gaga, and Taylor Swift were putting out hit single after hit single the world over. Kathryn Bigelow surprised the world by beating her ex-husband and shattering the glass ceiling at the Academy Awards. But most relevant to the topic of today's video was the birth of a certain television network that caused a ripple in the world of animation. A joint venture between Hasbro and Discovery, it was to be a competitor to the big three animation networks, Nickelodeon, Disney Channel, and Cartoon Network, airing mainly shows based on Hasbro-owned properties and reruns of the Saturday morning cartoons of old. Few of their originals would last longer than a year or two, even fewer would be remembered except by the network's most die-hard fans. But one show of theirs was an outlier that would become a cultural phenomenon, a staple of 2010's pop culture. The sole reason most even gave the network any attention at all in its time, or remembered today that the network existed. The show even managed to far outlive the network itself and run for every year of the 2010s. Indeed, among the pantheon of the decade's television animation, its throne sits among Gravity Falls and Steven Universe as one of the titans, if not the chief among them. That network was the hub, and that show, that pop culture colossus of a show, was none other than My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. "15 years. Hard to believe it's been a whole decade and a half since Friendship is Magic premiered. The show's Crystal Jubilee, I've seen it called. Insert Saving Private Ryan gif here. As many other millennials and zoomers were, I was quite big on this show in its heyday. One of the bronies, as we called ourselves. And still do, albeit not as frequently given that the show ended over half a decade ago. Unless you've been in a coma since 10-10-10, My Little Pony Friendship is Magic is a show that needs no introduction. You know very well that this is a show that defies all expectations it sets forth with its outward appearance of what one may call a little girl's show. Largely because this is a show made by a team of writers, animators, and voice actors who understood that even little girls deserve quality entertainment and to have their intelligence as an audience respected. The result of their efforts was one of the most critically acclaimed shows of its day, praised for its smart writing, fluid animation, fleshed out characters, catchy musical numbers, and not overly stimulating tone. And much like Thomas and Friends before it and Bluey after, it would garner a massive fan base of adults, especially autistics, on top of its main fan base of young children. Today we're going to look back at the season that started it all 15 years ago, and rank all its episodes on a system of 6 tiers, S, A, B, C, D, and F. I trust you've seen enough tier lists by now that you can figure out on your own what all those letters represent, and even if you haven't, well, you went to school, you know how letter grades work. Also, for those of you watching this video after its premiere and want to skip to a specific episode to see what I have to say about it, time codes for each episode will be given both in the video itself and in the description. There's 26 episodes to get through, or 25 depending on how you count two-parters, so let's make this channel 20% cooler by learning how Equestria was made.
Hello?
Yes, we start this season, as well as the show as a whole, with a two-parter, a tradition that will go on to be followed by every season for their premieres and/or finales. And as far as series premieres go, Friendship is Magic is pretty solid. The first part is essentially used to introduce the characters, the main 6 as they're called, the bookish nerd Twilight Sparkle, the hyperactive comic relief Pinkie Pie, the hardworking farmer Applejack, the sporty tomboy Rainbow Dash, the glamorous fashionista Rarity, and the timid animal lover Fluttershy.
Well, that was easy. A baby dragon! Oh, he's so cute.
Best Pony. And the second part is where the actual story, with actual stakes and conflict, kicks in, for the ponies to show off how well they represent the elements of harmony. Of course, as we all know, that's honesty for Applejack, kindness for Fluttershy, laughter for Pinkie, generosity for Rarity, loyalty for Rainbow, and magic, the most powerful element, for Twilight. The character introductions are all handled pretty well. They show everything the audience needs to know about these characters in an entertaining manner. Whenever I rewatch this two-parter, I don't find myself thinking, there's this one thing I think they could have covered. As for the second part where the main six pursue Nightmare Moon / Princess Luna, the way they're shown to represent their elements is handled less well. Most of them are handled fine. Fluttershy, Rarity, Rainbow, and Twilight's representations are all handled well, and Pinkie's, while I have mixed feelings about her song being the first in the show given we'll see later on how big the show goes with its musical numbers, her representation of laughter is otherwise handled well. But with Applejack, the way the story attempts to show her honesty is by having her tell Twilight that her fall down a cliff will be safe, and then Rainbow and Fluttershy, being the Pegasi, catch her. 1. This is more a showcase of Fluttershy being kind and Rainbow being loyal than Applejack being honest. 2. That's not honesty, that's trust me, bro. There's a difference between honesty and trust. Honesty is telling the truth, trust is being dependable. They're similar virtues, but they're not the same thing. Also, back to the first part, the Cutie Mark Crusaders canonically don't know each other yet. They shouldn't be huddling together like this when Nightmare Moon shows up. As for nitpicks, I would have liked to see a bit more of the story in the first part. Both parts are still well written as they are, but I still feel it's a bit lopsided, with how much the first focuses on the characters and their interactions, and only at the end do actual stakes show up for the next part to have the bulk of the story. It's still a fun two-parter though, and a solid introduction to the show, if a bit spotty in places. B tier.
I get to play my favoriteest of favorite fantabulous games like Pin the Tail on the Pony!
So, production trivia. This show was originally greenlit to have 11-minute segments, before Faust pushed for the full 22-minute episodes we know today. The Ticketmaster was initially written with the original runtime in mind, and yeah, it shows. In fact, a lot of these early episodes feel like the writers were taking stories envisioned for 11-minute runtimes and stretching them out to 22 minutes, so don't be surprised if I use terms like filler a lot about these early episodes. That's not to say filler can't be entertaining, of course, and as stretched out as this episode feels, and is, I do find myself enjoying it more than not, and it does well setting up what will be the big arc of the season, the main six going to the Grand Galloping Gala. Twilight's friends' reasons for wanting her extra ticket all fit their personalities well, as do the ways they do favors for her and trying to convince her to give it to them. And you can never turn down a good Benny Hill reference. Also, side note, as someone who considers Fluttershy and Applejack to be their favorite and second favorite of the main six, I find it funny that this episode implies that those two specifically are Twilight's closest friends, or at least the ones with the best reasons for going to the gala. The mid-production change to 22-minute runtimes did leave this episode having a lot of filler, and the animation has the most suspect quality in the entire show. Would it really have been too much trouble to actually animate Rarity's fantasy sequence instead of having just crossfades? But what the writers came up with is still entertaining to watch. It's by a hair away from the tier below, but I think this one still holds up well enough for another B.
I sure do look funny.
Honestly, there's a part of me that doesn't want to rank this episode in the lower tiers, because this is one I actually do enjoy quite a bit. Applejack's sleep-deprived antics are funny, especially with her mishearing what Twilight and Pinkie say, and the episode has a good moral about not overworking oneself and accepting help when it's needed. Also, this zoom out on Applejack during the catapult scene lives rent-free in my head, and I love Twilight's alliteration as she tells Applejack off for her stubbornness.
It's overpropelled Pegasus, practically poisoned plenty of ponies, and terrorized bushels of brand new bouncing baby bunnies.
So if I enjoy Applebuck season, what exactly is the problem with it? Well, simply put, I feel like this story should be coming later in the show's run than, well, the fourth episode, third story overall, and the first to focus on Applejack specifically. We barely know Applejack yet, and while yes, it can be inferred that she's a hard worker just from her being a farmer, it hasn't been outright established, let alone enough to show that she can also be so to a fault. This is the kind of episode that should be coming later on, after Applejack's work ethic is established. Set it up as a positive trait of hers in one episode, then later on, deconstruct it and show how it can also be one of her faults. This episode jumps right to the deconstruction, and it just doesn't work, not like the writers wanted it to. It leaves the episode feeling like a follow-up to an episode that doesn't exist. It also doesn't help that the episode is repetitive. Not only does this episode have two stampedes happen, one of cows and one of rabbits, but it uses the same music and even the same animation of Rainbow alerting the pony villains to said stampedes. It's jarring to see play out. But honestly, I'd rather see reused animation than a long stretch of crossfades like in the previous episode. This is one case where being ahead of the times isn't a good thing. I'd probably rank it higher if it came later in the show and didn't blatantly reuse animation, but this early on, I feel the C tier is as high as I can rank it. This is another filler-heavy episode, with much of the first act dedicated to Pinkie chasing Rainbow Dash, followed by them pranking their friends and each other. Again, it's enjoyable filler to watch, but it's still filler. And under a critical lens, I'm left wondering if this was another episode originally envisioned with an 11-minute runtime. The story really kicks off though, when the episode introduces Gilda, the Griffon, an old friend of Rainbow's who turns out to be a toxic bully. I do have to dock off points for the story feeling rushed by the filler-heavy first act. I'd have liked to see Pinkie set up the party for Gilda, and Rainbow be shown to set up the pranks as she says she did. The way it's executed here, Pinkie sees Gilda's behavior, and then it just cuts to the party, after a jarring act break transition that seems like it was meant to be a match dissolve. However, the episode still has it in the other areas that count. The pranks are enjoyable to watch, both with the filler that sees the main six fall victim, and in the third act that sees Gilda get what's coming to her. And the episode has good moral on top of that being that any so-called friend that puts one's other friends down is in fact not a friend at all. Believe me, as someone that learned the hard way back in my DA days, morals about toxic friends, aka fake friends, are ones even some adults need. Again, it's not a perfectly written episode, but still an enjoyable watch with a moral that needs to be taught more. B tier.
No! Green hair! Not green hair!
This episode is incredibly mediocre. If it wasn't for the fact that Trixie makes her debut here, I'd probably say it's only worth watching by those who want to commit to watching every episode of the show. Rarity's hair getting turned green gets a chuckle out of me, and the sequence of Twilight subduing the Ursa Minor is intricate enough to be interesting, but the rest is a slog. Around a third of the episode is spent at Trixie's show, with not enough happening to be interesting. Snips and Snails are annoying comic reliefs, who I'm glad don't get that big of appearances after this episode, at least not in major roles. And Trixie also gets annoying fast, with her ego and how she describes herself as great and powerful so much that she comes off like General Yunnan. I get that that's the point, but that show segment Toadcatcher at least knew how to make Yunnan's ego funny. Here with Trixie, it's just annoying and repetitive. Trixie will appear in episodes better than this, and with better writing, but her first outing is a C-tier episode, saved only by its entertaining climax. Wow, the first episode with Fluttershy as a focus, and already she's going up against a dragon, as the payoff to a slow burn of a story. This has many a funny moment from Fluttershy and her cowardice, including her coming out of her college in football gear and pool floats, being literally afraid of her own shadow, and especially this shot of her stretched across a tiny chasm that's just asking to be made into a meme.
Hop, skip.
Just don't look down.
And of course it's also satisfying, after all these moments, to watch Fluttershy stand up to the dragon for attacking her friends and affecting Bougainville's ecology with their smoke snoring. As someone who regards Fluttershy as their favorite pony and a role model, it's quite satisfying to watch. I especially love her line about how the dragons should know better because they're bigger than the ponies. Too many in this world love the privilege of power, but don't want to accept the responsibilities that come with it. Leave it to Fluttershy to remind a goddamn dragon of them through her motherly discipline. This is a solid first starring role for my favorite pony, and a B-tier episode. Now here's an episode that really doesn't need to be watched outside of full series marathons. Simply put, this episode feels like it belongs in a lesser, more pandering little girls show. The premise of a sleepover isn't explored much beyond the usual cliche activities, and Rarity Applejack's bickering gets exhausting quickly, to the point where I end up feeling like Twilight by the climax. Not to mention Applejack actually makes things worse by trying to keep the branch from falling. Look at that, if she did nothing, the branch would have fallen away from the library, and likely caused little damage aside from to the exterior of the house over. It's nice to see AJ and Rarity eventually work together to get rid of the branch, and I'll admit that it's funny to watch Twilight try to convince herself that the branch being in the library counts as camping. But that doesn't make up for the rest of the episode being an annoying slog to get through. It's a D-tier episode for me.
You made me look ridiculous.
You made me sound ridiculous.
I'm glad to say though, that the next episode, Bridle Gossip, is the best one yet. It teaches that don't judge a book by its cover moral in an intelligent way. doing so in the literal way with an actual book, and a more figurative way as an allegory about racism. This episode is the first major role for Applebloom, Applejack's younger sister, and the debut appearance of Zecora, the zebra shaman, Zebra, who lives in the Everfree Forest. Applebloom is characterized here as a mischievous, somewhat tomboyish filly, whereas Zecora is depicted as a mysterious outsider who speaks in rhyme, and is used as the central character in the figurative side of the don't judge a book by its cover moral, where the other ponies, especially Pinkie, think that she's an evil enchantress, she does evil dances, and you know the rest. But it actually turns out that, while she is indeed a witch, specifically an alchemist, she uses her potions for good, in this case, treating the main six's poison joke afflictions from a recipe found in the book that Twilight brushes off when found in her library, and is the subject of the literal side of the moral. Speaking of the afflictions, and as the name poison joke would suggest, they're the source of the majority of the episode's comedy. And it all hits damn well, exploring almost every possible joke to be made with them, as well as the afflictions themselves, providing an amusing contrast to the characters' personalities, especially with Fluttershy ending up with a bass voice that she later uses to sing the evil enchantress song. You can probably guess that, with me being a bass singer with Fluttershy as a favorite pony, that this is one of my favorite moments of the season. And it's not the only time we get to hear Flutter Guy, as Spike calls her, in the show. Stay tuned for Season 4. This episode is a winner and one of the highlights of the first season of the show. A tier. I love how deceptive this episode starts out, with Fluttershy picking flowers for Princess Celestia while singing La 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 as the woodland animals fly and run around her. It feels like the episode's trying to make you think the franchise has gone back to pandering to little girls instead of giving them quality writing. And then the Parasprites show up with the real episode, a fun story about the main six banding together to rid Ponyville of the adorable infestation. In terms of characterization, the highlight here is with Pinkie Pie, who is shown to have a method to her madness as a Cloud Cuckoo Lander, while the rest of the main six try, and fail, to get rid of the Parasprites with traditional, seemingly sensible methods, and Fluttershy makes it worse by keeping one of them in her cottage. Pinkie has the craziest idea of all, getting together musical instruments to Pied Piper the Parasprites away from Ponyville. And it ends up working, and ties into the moral about not turning down ideas just because they sound ridiculous. One thing that makes the episode stand out to me is that it does not have a happy ending. Sure, it ends with Twilight learning not to turn down unusual ideas, but Ponyville is still left in shambles in the end, from the property damage caused by the Parasprites. The main six didn't save the town, they just got rid of the infestation, and there's still the damage they caused to clean up. It's honestly pretty ballsy for a kids show, especially one intended for elementary school-aged kids, to end an episode on a sour note. It shows that the show respects this young audience enough to say, hey, sometimes bad things happen and the good guys aren't powerful enough to stop it. Fluttershy keeping that one Parasprite is frustrating, both because it comes off as malicious on her part, and it feels like an asshole to keep the episode going past the halfway point of its runtime. That I will knock off points for, but the episode as a whole is still enjoyable enough for me to place it in the B tier.
Good morning, friends.
And here we have one of the big ones, a fan-favorite episode among bronies, at the point where many say the show truly grew its beard, and it's for damn good reason. Let's just cut to the chase on this one. Winter Wrap-Up is an S-tier episode. When it comes to the things that fans like to see from Friendship is Magic, this episode gets everything right. The story, the characterization, the comedy, the world building. The titular song is a banger too. The staff truly put their best foot forward here on just about every aspect, and their efforts paid off tremendously. One of the standout things to me about Winter Wrap-Up, and given the show's huge autistic fanbase I bet for many others too, is how much like an autism story the episode feels. I've long headcanoned Twilight to be autistic, and this episode is one I feel gives me a particularly strong argument in saying so. What's one thing autistic people struggle with the most? Fitting in. And that's what Twilight tries to do throughout the entire episode, as she fails through every job she takes on, culminating her breaking down in tears when she has her biggest failure, causing an avalanche after trying to use magic to plow the fields. And yet, just as the Ponyvillians are bickering after they fall behind schedule, she still finds a way to help to fit in. And that's by making use of her own skills, her own special interest if you will, of organization, and getting the town's ponies to work quickly and efficiently to bring about spring on time. For this, she is not only accepted, but rewarded, with the position of leading all the teams of this showcase of Equestria as a Type 1 civilization. As an autistic that struggled to be taken seriously throughout their life, I feel proud of Twilight in the end, having watched her go from a goldfish in an unfamiliar lake to the bull shark confidently ruling the waters. And that's on top of its other qualities in the technical and writing aspects. It'd be a great episode even if it wasn't particularly relatable to autistics, but the fact that it is makes it that much better in my eyes, and I'm sure the eyes of many others as well. This episode has truly earned its reputation as a favorite among bronies, and is a highlight not only of the season, but the show as a whole.
Cupcakes, so sweet and tasty. Cupcakes, don't be too hasty. Cupcakes, 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 cupcakes.
This is another episode dedicated to Equestria's world building, in this case, cutie marks, the symbols that appear on the flanks of the ponies when they find their special talent. And it does so just about perfectly, showing and explaining them effectively enough that the viewer isn't left with any questions about how they work, even showing that they're a force beyond magic, because you know there'd be the person asking that question. The episode even goes far enough to show culture built around the cutie marks, namely the cute Saniera parties celebrating a foal's new mark, and how some snobbish ponies like Diamond Tiara, whose cute Saniera is celebrated in this episode, will bully blank flank ponies like the star of this episode, Applebloom. Speaking of which, Applebloom, in only her second major role, already feels like a fully realized character by the end of this episode, helped by writing that depicts well the mind of a child, and how children express impatience, down to the schemes she tries for instant gratification, and trying to hide her lack of a mark thinking she'll get mocked for it. And while she does, mostly by Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon, she also in this episode properly, keyword properly, meets Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo, two other blank flanks with whom she quickly befriends and forms the Cutie Mark Crusaders, serving as both a happy ending to her story of not fitting in, and giving us the audience a prologue to the rest of the CMC's exploits. Things are really picking up for the show now, especially with back-to-back episodes with perfect balance between storytelling and world building that places them both in the S tier. And that makes 3 world-building episodes in a row. This one focusing on the running of the leaves, Ponyville's annual race to help shake the autumn leaves off the trees. This is yet another great episode. Not only is the world-building on point, but Applejack and Rainbow Dash's competition is engaging to watch. I appreciate the decision during the Iron Pony competition to show the abilities they have over each other just as athletes, for having Rainbow show off the big advantage she has over Applejack, her wings, which AJ ties up so that she doesn't cheat during the running of the leaves. The episode makes heavy use of slapstick, which makes this episode feel like a 22-minute Looney Tunes or Tom and Jerry episode. And I mean that as a compliment, because the slapstick in here is executed as well as some of the best cartoons of both those series. If Chuck Jones had lived to see this episode, I believe he would have loved it. And that's before getting into Pinkie's commentary during the race, which is also hilarious. The slapstick also helps the episode's visuals, which it already had going for it thanks to being set during the fall. The warm hues of the foliage and the muted, overcast sky make this episode feel cozy. They remind me of upstate New York. Not to mention the animators didn't cheap out on showing the leaves either. You can see each individual leaf in detail as they're falling through the breeze or scattered on the ground. On a purely visual level, this is one of the best episodes of the season. I do think the episode is weakened a bit by not having Twilight come in first in the end. I know the moral is that friendship is more important than competition, and that moral is presented well, but I can't help but feel it was a missed opportunity to also teach slow and steady wins the race, especially with how well this show presents its morals even this early on. Aside from that one nitpick though, this is a thoroughly enjoyable A-tier episode thanks to its comedy and animation.
Those amateurish designs look like a piled-on mishmash of everything but the kitchen sink.
Half a season in, and already this show's done a pretty good job of shaking off the stigma of it being part of one of the most notoriously girly franchises, with well-written stories, lively animation, fleshed-out characters, and a world investing enough to get mentally lost in. So with the show now tackling the stereotypically feminine subject matter of fashion, particularly the topics of dressmaking and fashion shows, you'd expect a damn good episode to justify doing so. One that does not pander to little girls by feeling like something out of the generation when Rainbow Dash always dressed in style. Thankfully, it's a damn good episode we get out of Suited for Success. Being the fashionista of the main 6, Rarity is of course the star of this episode, in which we get a look into her process as a seamstress and fashion designer, complete with a catchy song paying homage to Stephen Sondheim.
Twilight's dress, cutting out the pattern snip by snip, making sure the fabric falls nicely. It's the perfect color and so hip. Always got to keep in mind my pacing, making sure the clothes correctly facing.
Only way to make a work of art. Every moment makes a contribution. Every little detail plays a part. Having just the vision's no solution. Everything depends on execution. Putting it together, that's what counts.
The dresses she makes for her friends look nice too, perfectly capturing their personalities and aesthetics. And I mean that for both dresses she makes for them. The outfits that look like something out of the fashion show from True Stories, I've been waiting a long time to make that reference, and the dresses we'll see them wear to the gala later. The transitions showing off the latter are cool too. I always get a kick out of Pinkie being her usual reality-breaking self by eating that gumdrop. The morals are well executed too. Funny how in the episode that could easily be feared by the viewers going in to pander to its target audience, Rarity learns not to pander to her customers. It's like the staff knew an episode like this was a risk and were patting themselves on the back for pulling it off. Well, pats earned. As for Twilight, she learns to express gratitude for gifts given to her and, pun earned, not to look a gift horse in the mouth. Props to the show to say that die Kundin ist keine Königin. It's a moral that the Karens really need to hear. And of course, there's that line from Rainbow Dash. I trust if you're watching this video, you already know what it is. I do find it amusing though that, with her being the most tomboyish of the main six, she says that line about what she expects from her dress. An episode like this could have easily turned out badly, but instead, it turned out to be one of the best of the season, and another one that finds itself in the S tier. You know, I've seen this episode described as a story about accepting someone's religious beliefs, and yeah, I can see how someone can interpret the episode that way. But I see the moral as more how it's presented to us, a moral about accepting a field of science that one doesn't fully understand. One doesn't need to fully understand the laws of thermodynamics to accept that water freezes at 0 Celsius and boils at 100. And Twilight, nor any pony else, doesn't need to understand Pinkie sense to accept that something like her tail twitching means something is about to fall. It's a moral that people really need to be taught more. As for the episode itself, there's quite a lot of entertaining slapstick during the first 2 acts, and the Hydra poses an entertaining threat to the ponies in the third. I appreciate how this episode decided to not focus on the regenerating heads like depictions of Hydras usually do, because you know if they did, they'd have a scene of the ponies surprised to see 2 heads grow upon the severed neck stump of another, even though that's the one thing everyone already knows about the Hydra. No, this episode instead shows off the poison breath, which is also canon in Greek mythology. Good on this episode for trying something different with the Hydra, and good on the show for teaching another moral that even some adults need to hear. This episode's not one of my personal favorites, but it's still good as it is. Good enough for the B tier. The City of Cloudsdale is the next yet unexplored part of Equestria to get its own world-building episode, showing it as the home of the Pegasi and where the weather of Equestria, from the clouds to the snow to the rainbows, is literally manufactured. We even get a look into the factory where it's made, in case you needed any more convincing that Equestria is a Type 1 civilization. But of course, a world-building episode would be boring to watch if it didn't have a story to go with it. And this one does, focusing on Rainbow Dash's performance anxiety before the Best Young Flyer competition, where she plans to perform a difficult, elusive maneuver, the titular Sonic Rainboom. All while the vain side of Rarity rears its head as she shows off her temporary wings Twilight gave her to C and later B in the competition. The main thing this episode has going for it is the build-up to the Sonic Rainboom itself, and the big cheer Fluttershy lets out after several quiet yays. And it pays off well. A detail I feel gets overlooked is the fact that the Sonic Rainboom isn't done so much as part of Rainbow's performance, but out of desperation to save Rarity and the Wonderbolts after the former's wings evaporate and the latter get knocked out by Rarity's flailing limbs. It's a nice way to have Rainbow get over her performance anxiety, and it shows that she is indeed the loyal pony the elements of Harmony prophesized her to be. In addition to having its weather manufacturing shown off well, Cloudsdale is also an appealing city to look at, with its combination of clouds and Greek-inspired aesthetics, fitting for Pegasus ponies in both their association with weather in this universe and their origin in Greek mythology. Those bully stallions could have been handled better though. I get that they're supposed to be annoying, and it's nice to see them respect Rainbow in the end, but there's a reason we have a rule of 3 when it comes to many things, but including comedy. And Rainbow Crash isn't clever enough for me to want to hear more than 3 times in 22 minutes. Also, the one with the basketball cutie mark, Wiki tells me his name is Hoops. He has a jarringly unfitting voice. Was it really so much trouble to get someone masculine sounding that they had to settle with Kathleen Barr?
And I love it!
Maybe you do other Kathleen Barr character, but I don't. I wouldn't consider their inclusion useless to the episode, however. They're still effective antagonists for Rainbow Dash to overcome, along with her performance anxiety, and give us, the audience, some pony to root against, even if they're overqualified for their role. I may have problems with how the bullies are depicted, but everything else is solidly executed enough for me to give this episode an A.
I'm the world champ, you know. I bet you can't beat me.
Now, what did I just say about the rule of 3? Don't break it unless you're absolutely sure you have good reason to. And having the Crusaders shout in unison is not a good enough reason to. At least here though, they're annoying in other ways than the bullies in the previous episode were, and their behavior ties into the episode's moral about not taking on tasks that one can't handle, even if I don't enjoy watching or listening to them. Thankfully, the episode on Fluttershy's side of things is more tolerable. She's shown here to be surprisingly pretty good with discipline when it comes to her animals, giving them a hard stare to make them fall in line. Her and Paddington would get along well. And because of her animal experience, she thinks she's a good fit to be a babysitter for the Cutie Mark Crusaders. Given that she never gets particularly angry with them, even with their annoying behavior extending to destroying her property and running off into the ever-free forest, I'd say she has the patience of a saint. Far more patience with them than they deserve, if you ask me. The episode is strongest in its third act, when Fluttershy finds there to be a cockatrice in the forest, and goes out to find it to save the Crusaders. Seeing her give the cockatrice the stare and tell it off as she's being turned to stone, honestly, I don't know what I like seeing more. That, or when she told off the dragon in Dragonshy. I mean, the dragon was orders of magnitude bigger, but it never tried to attack her. This cockatrice actively tried to petrify Fluttershy, and she told it off as it tried to make its move, unfazed if not unaware of what it was doing to her. Scenes like this are why Fluttershy is my favorite pony. She may be weak with other ponies, especially this early on, but put her with animals, either her own or something like a cockatrice, and she thrives. Overall, another solid episode. Even if the Crusaders can be annoying. For me, it's a B-tier episode, by a small margin from the tier below.
Ugh, I'll never come up with anything. Never, never, never.
You go into this episode knowing the Cutie Mark Crusaders' performance is going to be bad, but you can never prepare for how bad. The episode builds up how bad the Cutie Mark Crusaders' performance is gonna be, but it's even worse than it lets on. Even when you rewatch it and remember that the Cutie Mark Crusaders' performance is bad, it's even worse than you remember. And it's not even bad in a funny way. It's bad in a cringe way. It takes skilled writing and skilled execution to make something cringe and embarrassing in-universe seem funny to the viewers, and this does not have the skilled writing or skilled execution, especially when Scootaloo's singing voice is as grating as it is. The episode at least has a fitting moral, that being to not try to do anything that is outside of one's skills. But honestly, I'd have preferred that the main six stop the Crusaders before they embarrass themselves and put themselves at risk of injury or death from poorly built scenery, and crippling embarrassment and ridicule that will follow them all their lives. It also doesn't help that the Crusaders get the wrong message from the moral. They think that their talent is comedy, when we see right from the start that Applebloom is skilled in carpentry, a skill adjacent to design, Scootaloo is a good athlete, a skill they can translate to dancing and choreography, and Sweetie Belle is a good singer and songwriter. They had the skills to make their show work, and they passed them off to someone unqualified. That montage during the first act of the Crusaders trying to find their talents is entertaining enough, filler though it may be since they don't even learn about the talent show until the end of said act. I do like how it's presented without dialogue, and instead lets the music carry the scene. Applejack's reaction to hearing the Crusaders rehearse their song in the clubhouse is nice to watch too, especially when she smiles listening to her sister Applebloom. And again, despite the story itself being subpar, having the Crusaders engage in schemes for quick and easy cutie marks shows the writers understand how children try to get something they want. I just wish the episode had a better story and better execution of its moral to go with her characterization, and also didn't subject us to a musical number that's a pain to watch and listen to. As it stands, this is a C-tier episode bordering on D. It's got good moments, but it's not an episode I recommend watching outside of a full series marathon.
And when I try to get a deep breath, the stench of all you dogs makes me nauseated.
Diamond Dogs. Love a good David Bowie reference. As for the episode itself, it's a fun watch, for the most part. That moment where the canines are filling up the holes and the ponies and Spike get facefuls of dirt, I hope it's just an accident that that guy looks like what I think it looks like, because I thought we agreed over 50 years before this episode aired to stop doing this kind of joke. Also, it's a bit too convenient for the plot that Twilight knows Rarity's gem-finding spell. It's an example of telling instead of showing, and quite a blatant one at that. It goes like, I don't know the gem-finding spell. Yes, you do. Oh, right. Horn! I'd honestly had preferred them seeing them check through the holes like they're the Scooby-Doo gang going through doors. That would have been more fun, not to mention funny, to watch. Around these problems, however, a dog and pony show still manages to be enjoyable as a whole, each act giving different reasons to like it. The first act has nice bonding between Spike and Rarity, as the former digs up the gem's alacrities to fulfill her order for the pop star Sapphire shores, ending with Spike doing a Darth Vader impression when the Diamond Dogs kidnap her. The second act has the other main character setting out to save her, as they imagine Rarity, knowing her to be the most feminine among them, reacting her situation like a stereotypical damsel in distress. Spike in particular imagines himself as a knight fending off the canines with ease, and Rarity as the princess he's saving. He ought to change his name to Ralphie with fantasies like these. Also, this act ends with another Darth Vader impression from Spike, when he and the ponies see how many tunnels there are in the cave. That was funny. It's like poetry, it rhymes. But it's the third act when the episode is at its strongest. It turns out Rarity actually deals with her situation quite well, getting under the Diamond Dog's skin enough that they end up more victims than her. That bit of her whining in particular lives rent-free in my head. I must have watched that bit over 100 times during this show's heyday. And to this day, it never stops being funny. It's easily the highlight of the episode for me. And of course the scene of her taking offense to being called a mule is a worthy second place moment. I get a kick out of how she breaks the fourth wall during it by grabbing the camera. It's an underrated moment with how quick it is. This behavior of Rarity ties well into the moral of the episode, which is that just because someone is feminine doesn't mean they can't handle a rough situation. It even fits with the show's continuity. The ponies had only known Rarity to be feminine and ladylike by this point, and hadn't good reason to think that she could handle a stressful, even dirty situation, like being kidnapped and forced to work in a mine on her own. And now they know that she is in fact capable. There are some flaws with the writing I feel could have been ironed out, and again, that hole filling scene. That's a bad look show. But thanks to Rarity's characterization during the third act, as well as the comedy and moral that come from it, this episode sticks the landing like Sully in the Hudson. B-tier episode.
I am so frustrated I could just scream.
Well, that title's a lie. It's Applejack's eye color and one of Rainbow's main colors. In all seriousness though, it's an episode where everyone adores Fluttershy. Of course I love it. It also helps that Fluttershy herself gets some of her most iconic moments in this episode. From her quiet reactions to the stress she feels from being in the spotlight, great use of the rule of 3 by the way, to her weird behavior on the catwalk while under Twilight's magic. Actually, the episode as a whole has some of the best comedy of the season. Spike fawning over Rarity, even using his back as a pincushion for her, photo finish actually wanting Fluttershy to act shy in her photo shoots, and Pinkie appearing in random places to remind Twilight of her Pinkie promises. Yeah, this is the episode that introduces those.
Cross my heart and hope to fly, stick a cupcake in my eye.
You see, it's funny because the actual phrase is, cross my heart and hope to—
YouTube does not want Adler saying that!
Back to Fluttershy though, I don't know if it was intentional, but I'd argue Rarity choosing her to be a model for photo finish is a nice continuity nod. I mean, if one remembers Suited for Success, Fluttershy does have a freaky knowledge of sewing, as Applejack put it, as well as a fondness for French haute couture. By the way, since I didn't have the chance to say so while covering that episode, I think it's hilarious that France is apparently a place that exists in Equestria. But I digress. What I'm trying to say is, as much as Fluttershy is shown to hate modeling, she is qualified for the job. And since, like I brought up, Photo Finish actually wanted to show off Fluttershy's bashful personality, she would've, and did, thrive as a model under her. But of course, Fluttershy is not a pony of fashion modeling, that's Rarity. Fluttershy is a pony of animals and nature, who just happens to know about fashion, and as a model, had a boss that knew how to work with her. As much as I like this episode though, I will acknowledge that there are a few animation errors that drag it down. Namely, one of the ads showing Fluttershy smiling when Photo Finish was shown to not want to see that from her, and Spike getting angry with Twilight for telling about his crush on Rarity when she was alone when she blurted it out, aside from Pinkie, who also knew. I think there may have been a miscommunication between the staff here. Aside from that one issue though, this episode is still solidly written enough, and funny enough, to rank among the best of the season as an A-tier episode.
You've got to share. You've got to care. Hey! That's what I said!
Well, there's no way around saying it. This episode is horseshit. And what a shame too, because this is the episode that has Fluttershy's iconic, "I'd like to be a tree" line. The scene in which it happens is pretty nice looking too, with the stark contrast between the light of the candle and those ink-like shadows, and this shot of Spike that simulates backlighting. You can see and feel that Roger Deakins influence. And yet they wasted such nice looking shots and an iconic line from Fluttershy on this episode. Over a Barrel manages to be actively infuriating by being straight up racist. It's a natives versus settlers plot that sides with the settlers. That's bad already, but it gets worse than that. The buffalo are depicted as Native American stereotypes, complete with the teepees and war paint. You know, as if the audience is too stupid to understand the allegory. The moral of learning to share is childish, especially applied to a story like this where it can even be argued to come off as offensive. You Gotta Share, You Gotta Care is one of the worst songs in the series, both for the moral it ties into and how badly composed it is. The climatic pie fight is embarrassing to watch, especially with how it tries a death fake out when Chief Thunderhooves gets hit. All this combined makes for an episode that, even more so than Look Before You Sleep, feels like it belongs in a lesser kids show. It's a D-tier episode, saved from F only by being one of the more visually unique episodes of the season, and having that line from Fluttershy.
Oh.
Ah, Fluttershy episode. Now this is a palate cleanser. This is a more comedy-focused episode, and the episode makes clear that that's what it's going for even before the main plot sets in. From Angel making an Alice in Wonderland reference, Rainbow teasing the guards, Celestia trolling the cakes with the tea, Applejack taking too long to decide what to eat, to Rarity wearing her gala dress to see the princess, even though it's even more of an unofficial casual visit than Spike thought Celestia's arrival to town in Swarm of the Century would be. And let me reiterate, this is all before the main plot is set up. And said Pop sees Fluttershy kidnapping Celestia's seemingly sick pet bird, Philomena, so she can nurse her back to health. This episode is hilarious all the way through. So much so that I feel bad that I have to make it section one of the shorter ones so far, due to there only being so many ways to say something is funny. I will say though, that Twilight's lie about the dry air, the scene with the Scooby-Doo style doors, here's where the gag appears, and how over-dramatically Philomena's death plays out, are particular highlights with the episode. I also like how the episode ends with Rainbow managing to get a reaction out of the guards thanks to Philomena, bring that gag full circle. They even have the main six and Celestia laugh like it's the ending to a sitcom episode. It's a small gag the episode didn't need to give closure to, but it did, and the episode is better for it. I could have done without Celestia's exposition about what a phoenix is after Philomena is revealed to be one. I think most people, even among the target audience, know about how they're reborn from their ashes. But honestly, if a useless bit of exposition is the biggest problem I have with the episode, I'd say it's a pretty damn good one. Good enough for an A.
And that's how Equestria was made. What, huh?
We've had world-building episodes before, but now we have a lore episode, detailing how the main six earned their cutie marks, told by the six themselves to the Crusaders, as the latter, Scootaloo specifically, looks for her idol Rainbow Dash to figure out how she got her cutie mark, and how she, Applebloom, and Sweetie Belle can go about earning theirs. Before this rewatch, I considered this to be one of the best episodes of the show. Watching it for this video, however, I do still think it's a good episode, but I also think it has a few problems bringing it down. Young Applejack wanting to try out the city life isn't totally unbelievable to me, but her giving the upper class life any attention at all seems more like a Rarity trait than any of the other ponies, let alone a tomboy like AJ. Also, come on, no way anyone doesn't know what a rooster is even if they live in this city. There are also some animation errors in Rarity's and Pinkie's stories that break continuity, namely Rarity's horn leading her to the rock through the night despite her saying the play opened that night, and Pinkie being shown with her cutie mark before she's supposed to have it. That first one could be argued to be for comedic effect or they delay the play for an unspecified reason, but still. However, even with all the problems I have with it, it's all worth it in the end to find out it was Rainbow's Sonic Rainboom that led to all the main six earning their marks. That group hug is so wholesome to see, and I can understand why it was used by the hub themselves in the show's 2012 bumpers. It also helps that the episode itself has many other nice moments, from the funny, like Rarity cursing her horn for bringing her to the rock and Pinkie's black hole sun face, to the wholesome, like Applejack returning home and Fluttershy reassuring the forest animals after the Rainboom. Also, I don't care what Spike thinks, looking at the same rainbow was a perfect line to end the episode on. Cutie Mark Chronicles does fall apart a bit under a more critical eye, but the episode as a whole is still an enjoyable, wholesome, B-tier outing for both the main six and the CMC.
You set me up.
Well, 2 can play that game. Woo! Not who, 2!
Well, this is an episode that certainly exists. There's nothing notably bad about it, but it's one of those episodes you know exactly how it's going to play out as soon as it's established what kind of story it's going to tell. In this case, it's a jealousy story, where Spike feels threatened by Twilight's new nighttime helper, Owlicious, thinking he's out to replace him entirely. There are good things about the episode. The meteor shower scene is nice to watch, from the shower itself to all the interactions between the ponies, and of course how the scene is capped off with Pinkie's pun about how the punch has been spiked. The scene of Spike, Twilight, and Owlicious running from the dragon during the third act has some nice shots, and the episode's attempt to make a Who's on First style gag out of Owlicious saying who is cute, although if they use it any more than they did, it'd have just been annoying. But everything around those moments is what you may call mid. This is the kind of episode you just watch for completionist's sake. Like I said, there's nothing about this episode that comes off as offensively bad, but it's largely forgettable outside of the moments I mentioned. I give it a C.
Oh, they're not so bad.
What do you mean? Andrea Libman was not even nominated for an Annie Award for her performance as Pinkie in this episode. Party of One is not only a character-defining episode for Pinkie, but possibly even a career-defining performance for Libman. You know how film buffs like to pinpoint the specific scene in a movie that won an actor their Oscar? Well, it's Pinkie's mental breakdown as she throws Gummy his after-birthday party that solidified Pinkie as a fan-favorite character, and serves as proof to me and many others that Andrea Libman is more than just a talented voice actress, she's a talented actress, period. The way Pinkie breaks down is entirely believable for her, without coming off as uncomfortable or out of character. And the voices she gives to each of the quote-unquote guests at the party are unique, showing off Libman's wide range as a voice actress. This scene alone is why this episode is a favorite within the fandom. But it also helps that the episode itself, especially Pinkie's characterization, is consistently entertaining throughout. From her singing telegram and how she comes up with a different presentation to each of her friends, how she follows her friends around when she catches them in their lies, especially Rainbow, and how her color palette and mane are revealed to darken and deflate when she's feeling down. Side note, it's both funny and sad that Pinkie seems to find time to throw a party for every reason except her own birthday. She got so into making other ponies happy that she forgot her own birthday. It's nice to see that her friends didn't forget though, and took the time to throw her a party to surprise and remind her. Really makes this episode wholesome on top of funny. What I'm trying to say is, this episode is held in high regard for good reason. It is easily an S-tier episode.
You're going to love me!
And now for the conclusion of the season-long arc, the episode in which the main six attend the Grand Galloping Gala. Much like Suited for Success, this is an episode that deals with stereotypically girly subject matter, in this case, going to a ball. And not just a ball at a princess's castle. It's an even easier episode for the show, and the franchise, to lapse into pandering to little girls, with cutie dialogue, laughable stakes, and cringeworthy songs, with nothing of quality in the mix. But much like Suited for Success, this episode manages to avoid all that, with a practically flawless episode, aside from a few animation errors, to cap off the season. This show is a musical, of course, so we do get a song from the ponies about what they want to do with the gala. And it's the best song of the show so far, with classical instrumentation, a backing choir, and subtle shifts in mood based on which pony is singing, such as taking on a more operatic tone for Rarity, implementing electric guitars for Rainbow, and getting more bouncy for Pinkie. Someone with a deeper understanding of music theory than me can probably analyze it more deeply, but even with my cursory knowledge, I can recognize this as one of the show's best musical numbers. As for the story, while the stakes in it are low, it's just the ponies wanting to have a fun evening, those stakes aren't the focus of the episode. That would be the comedy. Largely stemming from how badly the gala goes for the ponies, and how they eventually take matters into their own hooves. And thankfully, that comedy comes here in quality and quantity. You know the staff thought that psychotic freeze from Fluttershy is funny when they did it twice. Once during the Pony Pokey, another fun musical number by the way, and the other when she bursts into the ballroom demanding the animal's affection. But of course there's also Prince Blueblood and what a hilarious dick he is, that groundskeeper pony that Fluttershy twice mistakes for an animal, and Spike acting drunk at Donut Joe's. One joke I feel doesn't get enough attention though, is Rarity destroying her glass slipper after Pinkie points out she left it behind. Like, she was really that horrified by the prospect of seeing Blueblood again. Even though, let's be honest, he wouldn't have cared anyway. He probably found another mare to treat like shit, and wouldn't have remembered by the end of the night, if he even noticed at all, that Rarity was wearing glass slippers. Also, that arc of Star Celestia makes over the castle. I see what you did there, show. especially considering that glass slipper isn't the only Cinderella reference in the episode. The pony's night may have gone terribly, but for those of us watching, we got a fun story with well-executed comedy and entertaining musical numbers to conclude the season on an S-tier episode. So let's recap. Among the episodes of Season 1, there have been 5 each of S-tier and A-tier episodes, 9 B-tier, I'm counting the two-parters in one episode, 4 C-tier, and 2 D-tier, with the F-tier having yet to be touched. That's a whole 40% of the season's episodes in the top 2 tiers, and the tier below that having another 36%. I'd say that's good enough to rank this season as an A. So what exactly are the highs and lows of the season? Let's put it to a top and bottom 5, the 5 best and the 5 worst. Let's start with the worst. Number 5, All's Well That Ends Well. Largely forgettable aside from a few fun moments. Number 4, Boast Busters. The climax is the only interesting thing about this episode. Number 3, The Showstoppers. That song was awful, on top of most of the rest of the episode being mediocre. Number 2, Look Before You Sleep. Applejack and Rarity's bickering are just too much to put up with. And number 1, last and least, you all saw it coming, Over a Barrel. A pro-colonizer story and a major slip in quality for a show that usually respects its audience. As for the best, there were exactly 5 S-tier episodes this season, so it's only a matter of putting them in ascending order. And for me, that's number 5, Suited for Success. An easy premise to screw up that luckily ends up being a ton of fun to watch. Number 4, The Best Night Ever. Another easy premise to screw up that ended up being arguably the funniest episode of the season. Number 3, Winter Wrap-Up. The perfect blend of world building, characterization, and story. Number 2, Call of the Cutie. A cute and relatable story that serves as the perfect beginning to the Cutie Mark Crusaders series-long arc. And number 1, Party of One. The definitive Pinkie Pie episode that manages to be just as heartwarming as it is funny. I'm gonna take a page out of the Unlucky Tugs Thomas retrospectives here. He has a great idea going with his choice of a single word or phrase he'd use to sum up each season of that show, and I'd like to try it out here for Friendship is Magic. And for Season 1, the word I'll use to describe it is redemption. This season took what had been one of the most notoriously girly franchises and made something legitimately entertaining out of it. Something that both kids and adults could enjoy. In fact, as we all know, it'd be the adult fanbase that became more well known than its kid fanbase. This season single-handedly changed the course of the My Little Pony franchise forever. No longer, at least for much longer, would it be known for suffocating cutesiness. It would now be known for its lovable characters, relatable stories, well-executed comedy, and masterclass puppet-rigged animation. Starting with this season, and solidifying that reputation in seasons to come. And now it is time for Adler to fly off. See you next time for a big ol' storm of chaos. If you would like to support this channel on a monetary level, then drop a donation at ko-fi.com/AdlerPOG. Monthly donors will get access to exclusive perks, such as donation credits in my videos and early access to completed OTOG chapters. Vielen Dank!